Hacks likes this very much.
Welcome to
Coffee with Toffees.
Let's do this!
Good morning. Welcome back to a new episode of Coffee with Toffees, guys. It's been a while since we've been on the air, but I wanted to make sure that I got back and we did a show to sort of give you an update on what's going on with the show, as well as talk about some hot topics I know have been on the news lately that normally would have weighed in on, that just haven't been able to because of situations sort of beyond my control. So what we're going to do actually is I'm going to start out giving you the update, and then we'll roll into chatting about the majors a little bit, some of the EG stuff, the new video that Dota 2 just released about their victory, and then finally wrap up with what's going on with C9 and some opinions there. So regarding the show, both Coffee with Toffees and Around the Pit, you'll notice there's no camera if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening, obviously you don't see that, but there is no camera on the video. Long story short, I was taping an episode of Coffee with Toffees about 3 weeks ago. Proxy PL does a section of the show called Proxy's Corner, where he talks a little bit about the competitive scene from the tournament perspective. And while we were showing his video, everything crashed. And if you go back and watch the last show, you can see it's cut off very abruptly. I started doing some tests because we had a big Around the Pit planned on that Sunday as well. And what I found out is the reason it went out is both, it looks like my GPU and 2 of my RAM sticks went bad. I talked to a couple of hardware manufacturers and they said, you know, the problem is not just that. If you replace those parts, that's fine. You'll be up and running for a little while, but your system is just too old and it's too strained. And this is, to be honest with you guys, I built this computer back in, I think it was 2009 or 2010 as a mid-grade budget computer for like $900, and it just isn't, it's fallen apart. It's the long story there, is the short story, I guess. So I'm going to do the show, and when I do stuff, I can't use video capture. So I can do light streams for like casting and things like that, but I can't actually show videos, which makes Around the Pit completely impossible. Running the webcam causes a lot of issues. So that's just sort of the stuff we're dealing with and why you haven't seen as many shows as I'm sure that you'd like to see. That's going to be corrected soon. I've been talking to some hardware sponsors. I really had 2 options, and some folks shared this with me. They said, listen, you can pay for it yourself, you can find some hardware sponsors, or you can run like an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter or something like that, kind of like what Sir Action Slacks did when his computer went down, and get the community to fund you. Now, I think our community is phenomenal and great, and you guys have been amazing, and I honestly, the last thing I wanted to do was come and say, can you give me money for a new computer? So I am doing everything I can to avoid that, and I think that we are at a position where I finally found a computer builder who looks like they want to step in and help out, make the fixes that we need to get the show back up and running. We're just finalizing the details on that. But until that happens, you're going to get the show without any video and stuff. Once that does come through, obviously you'll see their name on every show, and I'm very excited to work with them. So hopefully we close that deal and get back to Around the Pit. As soon as that computer arrives, Around the Pit will be back up and running every Sunday. At least that's what the plan is, assuming we can regain the traction that we've already lost. But that's why you haven't seen or heard a lot of shows. I'll be honest, life is also pretty crazy at the moment, so I also took the week off to sort of try to figure things out. When you add in the computer costs to regular life, it does get pretty hectic. But we're back, and I definitely want to make sure that you guys had an update show. So that's what's been happening on the Coffee with Toffees Around the Pit front. You'll also notice that I changed the Twitter from Toffees Dota 2 to Toffees TV. The reason for that is I am working on a politics podcast that should be coming out in the next month or 2. Again, the computer sort of set that back a little bit, and with that rollout, it means that it's not just Dota 2 content. No other game that I'm covering. We're going to be streaming a lot more. If the new computer comes in, we'll probably do some Fallout streams and things like that on my channel. But Toffees TV is just so that we can also do the politics podcast on the side. So that's it. That's the news. That's all you need to know about where I'm at, where the show's at. I promise you we're coming back in force. We're not going anywhere. We will be bringing all of the best content content, the best homegrown content, I think, straight to you as soon as we're back online. Now, let's talk about topics. And what I want to do is talk about some topics that have come up over the last 14 days that were very, very big hits. A lot of folks talked about them. I didn't get a chance to weigh in on them. And I think that a lot of folks asked me, especially about things like the talent list for ESL, what my thoughts were. So we're going to kind of go over the things that have happened, give a little more opinion than straight news, because honestly, I feel pretty strongly that the Dota news is a lot more accessible than it used to be. When I started this show, it was impossible to find news on all the tournaments that were going on, and we will continue to do that for you. But things like Renessa's new show, I think it's called AFK, or While You Were Gone, is phenomenal. And I think it's a good recap of the scene, so it's not necessarily something that we have to do as much as we used to. But I do want us to keep having conversations, interviews, and discussions about topics that are important. So the ESL Major, I have absolutely enjoyed it, especially, and I cannot say this enough, the storyline videos that they've been doing. Like the MSS one, the Eternal Envy one, all these videos that are coming out that sort of give you a look in these players' backgrounds and lives is really, really, really impressive. And that's what I have been missing from day one, since we started talking about esports, since we started covering Dota, and I've sort of really hope to see it grow and explode into sort of a, not, I don't want to say full mainstream, but more recognizable. And the reason for that is we want people who don't know what we do to not laugh when we tell them what we do, right? When I tell somebody, I love making podcasts about Dota or about esports, I don't want them being like, what are you, 12? Because that's bullshit to me. I mean, this is something that we love, that we're passionate about, that is competitive and is insanely complicated and deserves to be recognized. So I think these videos, these storylines, make this stuff accessible to the common person. And that's something that I really, really love. So these videos, next effing level, this is the stuff that I want to see at events on the regular. And hats off to ESL, to Valve, whoever paid for this particular aspect of the major, for putting the money and the time and the effort into them. Because here's the deal, guys. We talk a lot about these, and I'll talk more about it as we go through this. Funding is huge in these events, especially in majors, because it's not Valve, who a lot of us believe has an unlimited budget, putting on the major. They're giving it to ESL to present. So ESL's got a lot of the budget to handle, probably with some kick in from Valve. I don't know the details of it, but it's not an unlimited amount. So they had to choose to put money somewhere, and I think storylines are expensive, but they're also really, really important. So I'm glad to see them understanding that and putting the money where it needs to go to grow the sports. So that's the first thing I've loved about it. I've heard a lot of complaints about the format. It's the second topic from the major. And to be frank, I'll take this position here, and I pretty much believe it in almost every tournament that I've ever seen. I don't care. You're putting up a lot of money, you're putting on a massive tournament, you figure out a format that fits best for what you are trying to accomplish during your tournament, and if the teams want to play, they deal with the format. People are saying, you know what, best of ones are crap, we should never have them in a tournament this big. At the end of the day, if you can't win a best of one, don't get yourself in a position to play it. That's my stance. I know it may not be popular, and folks might say, well, you know, bad things happen, and you mess up sometimes, and you do. But it's just the way it is. This is like the NCAA in that context, right? If you follow college sports, especially college football, one bad Sunday can ruin your entire season, because the teams that are going to the bowls are teams that have had near-perfect records. So those guys go an entire year where if they drop a game, they drop a best of one, they may be out of it for the long term. At least this is just a major, and there's 3 more, if you count TI, coming up throughout the year to bounce back. So am I against best of ones? Absolutely not. Am I mad about anything with their format? I am absolutely not. I think that tournament organizers do a good job of figuring out what can work for them, with the exception of extremely long formats that take 2 to 3 weeks to accomplish. I can't get by those, but I think Frankfurt did a pretty good job with the way that they arranged this. So another kudos to ESL, both storyline and format. I'm good with it. Now, here's a topic that people went bananas over. This is the talent list for ESL. We haven't done a show since it was announced, and I will say that there was a massive brouhaha about no women on staff and about having a quote-unquote remote team, as well as others who deserve to be there. Here's my position on it. Here's the deal. A, this is put on by ESL, not Valve. So resources are far from unlimited. Just because someone deserves to go doesn't mean that ESL can afford to bring them. That's why you have a small team. They kept it small because of the fact that they don't have a ton of funding. And I know for a fact, and I'm not going to say how or where from, that they pretty much ran right up against the wall with the money that they had for this event. They spent everything that they had to make this good. So they didn't have extra cash to bring in extra talent. And you also have to remember, different talent demands different prices. It's not as easy as, do you want to come to Frankfurt and be on the panel? There's a lot of other things that go into this. Region, travel expenses, all of that stuff does come into play. So keep that in mind. When we talk about Valve, when we talk about TI, it's a totally different ballgame. I know that Valve has a much larger pocketbook when it comes to putting on TI than other organizers are going to have during the major processes. So that is something that we do have to keep in consideration. B, best people for the job plus right price plus the right schedule. Those are the three key factors when they consider the hiring. It's not just as simple as hiring somebody. So just because someone's on the panel or not there doesn't mean that they were completely available, that their price could be met. There's a lot of different factors that play into this. So when we just light a pitchfork or light a torch, grab a pitchfork and say hire somebody else, there is a difficulty that does come into that. Now, there is stuff we talked about like Winter not being on the panel and instead being on remote, and LD confirmed he would have been available to go. They just didn't want him to be there. And that's something that is a tough question. At that point, you have to then say a direct comparison. You have to say, well, I think Winter should be on the panel. Okay, let's look at who's there. Let's look at who he should replace in a one-to-one comparison. And that's where I think things become difficult as far as being a fan goes. Because when you break it down, you put everybody head-to-head, especially when you consider like regional travel, there's nobody who... Winter's awesome, and I've cast with him, and I think that he's a genius. But at the end of the day, if you put him side by side with the other analysts on the panel, there's arguments for and against all of them. So it's sort of a wash, and it just has to go with who ESL thinks makes the best show, which we'll get to in a little while when I talk about Piri and Flex. Now, the big one that everybody's talking about a lot was this alleged sexism on the panel or on the show in general because there are no women in the talent staff. Here's my opinion on it. Take it or leave it. Up to you whether or not you think it's relevant. Right now, in the Dota 2 scene, there are only 2 women who are comparable to the hired talent. So that's not to say that there aren't more women on the scene who become involved, who could do stuff. We've seen Jess do interviews. Excuse me. We've seen other women come in and fill roles, especially in like interviews, stage hosting, things like that. First, Casey, not an option. Casey Atchison only is TI. She works for a news station out of Seattle. If you think she's going to drop everything and fly to Germany for the weekend, maybe, but I don't think it would be anywhere near the price range that the guys from ESL would want to pay for that particular thing. So that's not even an option. Just throw that out the door. That leaves us with 2 people. Zoe and Shiver are the two, or So and Shiver are the 2 people who I firmly believe would be able to fill those roles. And now is where you have to get into a tough position. Is Sombi would be coming in only as stage host based on what we've seen on the talent list, right? So she would have to be a direct compete with Coddle Guy basically, as they only brought in 1 host. Zyora is only going to be doing hosting from an offsite remote. Honestly, I love Sombi. I think she does great work. I've seen her. She's doing a lot of Blizzard stuff lately. I've been watching all the Blizzard announcements as I am an old Blizzard guy. And she's been doing a ton of stuff for them. She does a lot for other games. And she's really good at what she does. But as far as Dota 2 focus goes, Coddle Guy far and away has been the hardest working stage host in the game. Has improved leaps and bounds over the last year, especially in this aspect of the job. And as I think we've seen during ESL, has done a phenomenal job on stage, being able to deal with the fact that there's nobody in the audience, or that it's been very quiet, making it feel comfortable anyway, handling the interviews very well. So I definitely think that Coddle Guy was the person for the job, and I think it just came down to, in a direct comparison for this position, when the planner sat down and said, here's our options, Coddle Guy was just the top pick in that area. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. The other one, the other big aspect of Coddle Guy that I think really sells him to a organization or situation like this is Coddle Guy's flexibility. So if you hire Sombi for the posting position, the only job that you're going to get her to be able to do is maybe stand in as a host if Red Eye were to get sick or something, but also, do the interviews and the stage hosting. Kato Guy has another benefit. This is a small staff. Imagine that a fluke flu hit the day or 2 days before majors, and it knocked out a couple of analysts, it knocked out a couple of casters. Any sort of conglomeration of people got sick. Kato Guy has the ability and the qualifications to step into any of those roles, to say, all right, well, I'm stage hosting, but I'm also going to cast a game, or I'm also going to sit on a panel to fill in for somebody who's unable to do it. And what that does is it brings additional value to his hire. So when you make that comparison, you add the additional value, the Swiss Army knife potential of a Kato Guy to the focused strengths of Sombi, you kind of understand a little bit about why they chose to make that decision. I think it's the right call. Now, the one that I think was a little more out there, a lot of folks said, well, this doesn't make sense to me, is why wouldn't you hire Shiver to be on the panel or in some capacity? And here's my thoughts on this, and I think this is a tougher one. I think that Shiver would have been absolutely perfect had they brought her in for the panelists. I think she could have filled in very well in those roles. But I think that the issue that we're having right now is that Shiver has been forced, and I say forced because I honestly believe that this is the nature of the game, has been forced to spend more time in a hosting role than a casting role. She's doing a great job over at Dream League, in the chair, sort of facilitating conversation, getting games set up, and then throwing it to, the casters. The problem with that is that I don't see her casting as much as I used to. And what that means is that you start to diversify, you start to de-specialize so that you can be a person who does everything. And I run into the same problem myself. I used to cast a lot, I focused on hosting, and I think I've improved a lot. But what that does is it makes me more and more limited in the jobs that I can get because I'm no longer an expert in anything except maybe hosting. And then that's the trouble that Shiver is running into as well, is when we become great at hosting, running a desk, we run up against heavyweights like Red Eye. There's no way, and I love Shiver to death, and I think there's a lot of great hosts out there, but almost all of us, if you put us next to Red Eye from his experience in past, we just can't compete in a head-to-head competition for that job. So Red Eye's going to get it every single time, which means that, the hosts have to sort of wait for their chance. And I think that that's sort of the perception that Shiver has right now, that she's a desk host or wants to. I know that she definitely enjoys it from what I understand. But when you go head-to-head with Red Eye, it's tough to get that job. And then you go, okay, well, where else can we put someone? Well, we need an analyst. We need that smart guy or that smart person. And then you say, well, Shiver's really good at analysts, and she's very, very smart, but nobody knows stats like Nahaz knows stats, so I guess we'll get Nahaz for that spot. And then you kind of go down the line, and you say, well, this person specializes in this, so we'll grab that person instead. And I think that that's where you sort of ended up seeing her not able to attend, and it's frustrating because I do 100%, and I'm going to go on the record and say this, that I think that in sports in general, women get a really bad placement, rap, however you want to say it. If you watch football, NFL football, the only places you ever see women are sideline reporting, working on some sort of capacity as a reporter or a host. You never really get to see them on the analyst panel. You never get to see them as the casters. And that's something that is not okay to me, and I see the same thing sort of developing in esports to a certain extent, and I worry about it. Now, does that bring up the topic that we need to make esports in general more open to women? I know a lot of women who don't even talk in game because they're worried about the vitriol that'll be spit at them if they do, and I think that's a discussion for a totally different time. That said, do I think ESL was being sexist in their hiring practices? I do not. I think that the real problem is a systemic lack of women specializing in the areas of esports. Right now, like I said, there's two, and you can find reasons why both of them would not have been in consideration. I think that you are someone who probably should have been in consideration and fit in to one of those panels. That said, though, really, there's not a lot of folks that you could look at that and say, well, this person deserves to be replaced. So I think that that's where the real struggle is. Finally, the last person who got a lot of flack, or people talked a lot of crap about being on the panel and said this guy should not be there, is Pyrian Flax, as he's been on record and said, I'm not a genius when it comes to Dota. I'm not a great caster. I don't know the game that well. I just love to play it. And I think that there is something to be said for having him on these panels because he brings in every man's perspective. He asks questions that I want to hear. more importantly, he takes the burden off of the host. You know, if you watch panels when he's there versus when he's not, Red Eye's job becomes significantly easier when Pyrion Flax is sitting around, because what it does is it allows Pyrion will talk when nobody's talking, he'll joke when nobody's joking, and he'll make it light and easier for a host to sort of transition between topics. And that's a really big thing. We don't think about the value of that, but it is absolutely imperative when it comes to doing something like this that you lend that value. Anyway, so that's just my opinion on the talent list. I think that there was a lot going around about that. I'm probably too late, so you may have fast forward through the whole section. If you did, then I understand. Stop here for new stuff. That said, though, I wanted to make sure that I covered it because I got asked a ton about it on Twitter and through other avenues, and I wanted to weigh in with my opinion before it becomes completely irrelevant in terms of the major. The games, you've seen them. I'm not going to discuss them. I will, however, try to release a best of Frankfurt Major matches list. So maybe the top 5 matches to watch for those of you who didn't get a chance to watch it all once it's all over. And that's kind of how I like to do it. Because to be honest, I can't watch them all. I've got a family, a job, and a wife. But I do like to go back, poll experts, poll the fans, and see which ones were the ones that were tournament changing so that we can all go back and watch the replay. Okay, other 2 topics to go over real quick. EG has a new video on the Dota 2 channel. If you go over to Dota 2, their YouTube, they just released its Evil Geniuses International Champion. It's a short video about EG's win. I think the 60 on over on ESPN, if you haven't seen that, definitely go check it out, was better. This has still got pretty gosh darn good. My favorite part of the whole thing, though, is they do a piece where they talk to Universe about the Echo Slam that won the world, basically, and he talks about how he yelled, and they cut to the scene of him screaming when it goes off. And then my favorite part is right after he does that, the camera's got Sumail right in the corner of it, and he's got this sort of like dead serious face on with his neck pillow, and then Universe goes bananas yelling, and Sumail just like gets this little smirk, and it's super funny. And that's at about 5 minutes and 20 seconds in, and just look for that because it brought a little joy to me. But that was a great video. Go check it out. I'm mentioning it because a lot of folks may not have seen it. It was sort of released quietly, so definitely something. Go look at the Dota 2 site. Check out that video. It's a good one, especially if you want some memories of TI. Finally, the last story I'm going to go over today is a big one. It was the announcement from Cloud9 that Reitsu would be released. Now, Cloud9 got knocked out of the majors yesterday. Within about 3 hours, they had a post up that said effective immediately, Reitsu has been dismissed from the Cloud9 Dota 2 roster. Today's elimination from Dota's first ever major, while unfortunate, held no bearing on his removal from the roster. In light of this decision, Cloud9 captain Theben1437 Silva shared his thoughts on the dismissal. And the quote from Theben is, Ritsu's performance on the roster was better than I expected, and while I've been missing him around as a friend and teammate, his indiscretions of his past inevitably led towards his outcome. His recent efforts to improve his behavior came too late, and following our elimination from the major, it was determined that Cloud9 was no longer the place for him to be. So, this is I think a tough thing. We know that Reitsu has tried to change his ways recently and become a little less known for starting things or strife, but it comes too little too late, and we see this all the time. A lot of folks talking about, is this the worst decision Cloud9 could make? Reitsu has done a great job as the carry. A lot of people think he was the key to the team's success as part of working with the synergy of the team, and you can't just kick one of your best players. If you go to the NFL, the NBA, any other major sports league, FIFA, I don't care, there is a long list of players that you can find who were absolutely amazing at what they did, but at the end of the day could not maintain their jobs because there was far too much indiscretion, too many issues, far too much, what's the word I'm looking for? Controversy around them. And I think that this is the situation that it's the first time I've seen it. I've only covered Dota. I don't cover the other esports. That I've seen controversy ruin a career. Maybe not ruin, but at least give a step back. And this is where the question now comes in. Will other organizations be willing to work with him? Because we see this all the time. A receiver will get a little too much controversy, will be cut from an NFL team. And while they're still great, nobody wants to pick them up because they just don't want the stigma, and that's something that Rich is going to have to deal with. Now, as far as whether or not it deserved to happen, here's the deal. There's two sides to this, right? There's the DC drama where Reitsu was part of a Skype group allegedly that leaked DC scrims with the express intention of keeping them from performing well. Now, that's one side. The other side is the Bisa article on Liquid, where Bisa explains about a long story where Reitsu basically, I guess, harassed the family, threatened to kill his sister, some other really crazy stuff. Like, if this is real, if the Bisa story is legitimate, that's the scarier part of Ritsu's past. That's the part that probably scared off Cloud9. Leaking scrims is not cool, especially if you're an organization, right? Because Cloud9 wants to be able to scrim in the future without people releasing their scrims and leaking that stuff. So they do have to sort of manage their position. That said, if you are playing in a professional organization for any sport, I don't care what it is, and you expect your strategies to be kept secret when you share them with someone, you are living in a dream world. Because I can guarantee you that if you let anybody from the Patriots organization into a scrimmage between the Colts and the Patriots, they would be recording it, as would the Colts. Both teams would be looking for an edge in any way they can find it because there are millions of dollars on the line in these games. And that's what we're all here for, is a winning team is a popular team. So, scrim your hearts out. Want to trust whoever you want to trust, but at the end of the day, if you think that some of your stuff's not being leaked, I think you're insane. That said, making an entire Skype group that is openly about hurting one team, probably, actually, definitely too far, but that doesn't make me nearly as incensed as the idea of personal harassment going well beyond the game of Dota. And that's the part that I think probably put the Cloud9 and Theben over the edge. The scrim thing, there could have been some serious repercussions, but I don't think that would have been a removal. I think it's that plus past indiscretions that caused this. And honestly, as much as it is difficult to say, based on what we know, because there has not been any evidence produced that I have seen to the opposite, and if you have some, please submit it to me. I would love to help make that stuff public. From what I've seen and what has passed over my desk, Cloud9 is making the right choice. Yes, it may set them back. They have time before the next major. They need to rebuild with the squad. I 100,000% appreciate what Theben is doing with the Cloud9 roster. I'm ecstatic to see the team that he put together performing well. It's been exciting to see some of those players, to see guys like MSS, who was on the show, who did an interview here, who I really wanted to see get ahead, who has helped, has tried to be part of this NA Dota scene as a pro for so long, get a great place to sort of call home. And I want to see this team continue with that same philosophy that Theben has. And honestly, I think that this Reitsu scandal would have cast a dark cloud over it going forward. And I think that this was the best choice for the organization to make. I'm sorry for Reitsu that he's going to have to go out and try to find his own thing. And honestly, I wonder what he will find. I expect to see a Reitsu stack, though, coming out pretty soon in answer to that, though. But kudos also to Cloud9 for cutting him immediately. Not just, some people said it's just to save face a little bit. I don't think so. I think this is a respect thing. They said, you did a good job for us. We want to give you as much time as you can to find other teams. In fact, we're announcing it while Majors is going on, because this is the part where sponsors start to scramble looking for teams right after the window lock ends, which is Majors. So this is a great time to cut somebody, and I think that they did it the right way. So that's all I really have to say about the topic. Based on the evidence that we have, I think the Cloud9 is making the right choice. I would love to see something of the opposite, but that's just sort of what we have seen come out regarding everything. So it is what it is, guys. That said, Reitsu off of Cloud9. So that's all I had for today. I wanted to get you a show. We got a couple minutes. You got a nice 30-minute thing here for you to listen to on the drive. Like I said, no video. For those of you who maybe tuned in a little bit late or skipped the first part, we're working on coming back. The comeback is not far off. I'm closing some negotiations with the hardware vendors to sponsor the show and get the new parts that I need, instead of asking for a couple $100s from fans, because I know that you guys work hard for your money, and I know that we all work hard for the money, and I hate asking. So I think that we'll have the hardware sponsors on board very, very soon, which should mean a full return to Coffee with Toffees twice a week, as well as Around the Pit on Sundays, as well as some new content that should be coming in the pipelines pretty soon. A big shout out to Razor, who has, obviously given us most of the keyboards and mice and all the fun stuff that we use for the show, as well as sponsored it. We appreciate you being on board. And if you do know a sponsor, if you are a sponsor looking to be involved with the show, please feel free to email me at 5MidasGaming over on Google. Anybody else who wants to email me, 5MidasGaming@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your feedback or ideas for the show. It's been great spending the afternoon with you. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Play more Dota. And as always, guys, Toffees out.